Here are our top 3 videos of 2023. Starting with number 3. 5 mistakes in DIY jewelry making.
Making jewelry is so much fun, and I know you want it to come out beautifully. So today, we're going to be talking about the 5 most common mistakes that people make when it comes to stringing jewelry. Hi, I'm Patty. I'm a jewelry designer here at Fire Mountain Gems and Beads, and I'm so excited to be here today to teach you how to beat these most common challenges. So, the 5 most common mistakes in stringing jewelry are incorrect crimping, stringing too tight, not enough stringing material, not finishing the ends of your strung jewelry, and using the incorrect stringing material for your projects. One really common mistake when it comes to stringing jewelry is incorrect crimping. If you don't crimp the ends of your strung jewelry correctly, they're going to come apart and ruin your piece. So let's look at some examples of incorrect crimps. So first, let's look at this one. You can see real close here, we have our piece of AccuFlex with a crimp on it and the little AccuGuard. Now the crimp here is puffy on both sides. A correctly crimped crimp is going to be crimped completely flat and kind of in a little U shape. So we see that this is flat but puffy, which means that it's not crimped hard enough, and this is going to come apart really easy over a little time. It may feel okay now, but visually inspecting that, it's not correct. Let's look at another one that is incorrectly crimped. We have one here. You can see it's crimped kind of sideways from the AccuGuard, and it's crimped really, really hard. So the crimp is actually, if you look really close, breaking on this side. So it's halfway broken. You want your crimp to be really nice and solid when you're finished crimping it. You don't want any breaks in it. So this one is not correctly crimped. This isn't going to really work for you. So let's see how to crimp correctly so you have nice, tight, solid jewelry. Let's grab some AccuFlex. We'll grab, let's see, I'm going to grab the 0.19 because that's a very common one to use. And 0.19 is the diameter. And let's just cut off a piece. All right. And now this is true of any material that you're crimping. You're going to crimp it all the same way if you're using a tube or a bead crimp. So let's grab our little crimp tube, and I will put that right on. And we'll use an AccuGuard here. You can use an AccuGuard or French wire to finish off the ends. I like the AccuGuards because they're so easy. So let's go ahead and thread through one side of the AccuGuard, up around the little horseshoe, and then back through. And then we're going to go back through the crimp tube. When I'm crimping, a 2x2 crimp tube is just about my favorite thing to use, and I really, really like them in sterling silver, gold fill, or silver fill. The reason being is that those metals are more malleable, and so when you crimp, it crimps tight without breaking. It's a really nice way to do it, and I put these inside almost all of my projects. So now I'll take my crimper, and there's an inside channel and an outside channel. On the inside channel, there's a little indentation there that goes into the crimp tube and makes an indentation. And the outside channel is just round. So let me show you how you use that. So first we're going to use the inside channel with a little indentation, and we're going to grab that crimp tube, and I'm holding it gently right now. And then I'm going to back off just 1 millimeter to leave room for my crimp cover later. And I'm going to crimp really nice and firmly with that inside channel. And I'm creating a little divot in the crimp on one side and it's rounded on the other side. That's what you want it to look like in the first step. So that's the first half of crimping correctly. The second half of crimping correctly is to use the outside channel, and that's the rounded channel. So I'm going to turn my piece sideways, just a quarter turn, put it in that channel so the sides are kind of up and down, and I'm going to crimp firmly down, closing that crimp bead up. And sometimes I'll flip it around the other way, and I just want to make sure that I've got a really nice tight crimp that is really going to last in your jewelry. A common mistake in stringing jewelry is stringing too tight. And there are a couple of ways you can string too tight that will be problematic. So let's look at those. The first way is to put your crimp too tight against your AccuGuard. See how the crimp bead is right all the way up against the AccuGuard or French wire if you were using that. You really need to leave a little bit of space there for your crimp cover to be able to go successfully around your crimp bead. So here is the AccuFlex, and then we have a crimp bead, an AccuGuard, and a crimp cover. So I'm just going to thread my crimp bead on. There we go. And thread on the AccuGuard. It's a little horseshoe shape. And you go through the bottom of one side of the horseshoe, up around, and through the top side of the other side out the bottom. And that's what that'll look like. And then the tail goes back through your crimp bead, of course. And then you're going to go through at least one other bead. Okay. So I pulled it nice and tight for now. Let me show you how to create that space. So here is my crimper. I'm going to use the outside channel of the crimper to close up my AccuGuard just a little bit. There we go, so that the bottoms touch. And that'll allow you a nice tight crimp. And then kind of holding on to the tail down here, I'm going to grab with the inside channel of my crimper, very lightly, I'm grabbing that crimp bead. Then pulling the tail tight, not too tight, but nice and snug, I'm going to push on my AccuGuard away from my crimper, and that is going to naturally leave a space. And I'm pushing real tight, lots of pressure. And there I have my really nicely crimped crimp here with just a little bit of a space for the crimp cover. So let's go ahead and turn this sideways. Use the outside channel here to crimp the crimp in nice and tight. And I use that outside little kind of a plier area to do a little extra. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut off my tail below my other bead down here. And now I have a really nice space with which I can put on my crimp cover. Set it on your work surface, and you can use the outside channel of your crimping pliers to pick it up. Just like that. You can readjust it with your fingers if you need to. And then I like to hold it by the AccuGuard and let the crimp fall right in to the crimp cover channel. Should fall in really nicely. And you can just lightly close that up and just kind of go around in a little circle to round that out and close up the gap. And there you have a very nicely crimped end. The other way that you can make a mistake in crimping too tight is to not leave enough slack when you crimp. Now, it seems like you don't want any slack because you don't want extra space at the ends of your piece. But if you leave no slack at all and crimp it very tight, especially with something wide like these rondelles, It doesn't have any room to drape or move. It's stiff and it's not comfortable. So you want to leave a little ease there. And let me show you the right way to do that. So in order to leave slack when you're crimping the second end of your piece, round it like it's going to be worn. So this is a bracelet, so I want it to go all the way this way. And you can see I've got it pulled tight, too tight to really do that accurately. So I'm actually going to pull out a little more space and see if it naturally will lay the way I want. It needs more space. A little bit more, and little adjustments are good. Sometimes that's what you need. Okay, now it lays really nicely in the configuration that I want it to be. So I know that that's where pretty much where I want to crimp it. So there'll be just a little slack in there, but it's necessary. Okay, so then I'm going to go ahead and take my crimper, the inside channel, and grab the crimp bead. And I'm making sure to really push that AccuGuard all the way away to leave space for the crimp cover. Crimp really tight. And turn it sideways. Close that with the outside channel there. Sometimes I do it on both sides. Maybe a little assurance with a little plier grip at the end there. And now I have that crimped so it's not too tight. This is going to drape really nicely around my wrist. A really common mistake that people make in stringing jewelry is not quite leaving enough stringing material at the end of the piece to easily string it through the crimp, through the AccuGuard, or the French wire, whatever you're using. So let's look at a piece. This is a really cute bracelet. One side is finished and the other side I've just cut off, and I feel like this is enough space to crimp with. But the truth is you really need about double that. So a couple of inches is really handy. This is just over an inch, and this will make it very fiddly for me to try and crimp it. If you watch, I'll put the crimp bead on there, and I'll put the AccuGuard on there. Let's see. I love these AccuGuards. These are really wonderful for stringing. Okay, it goes through the bottom of one side, and now look how little space I have to work with it. I kind of have to hold it down here and get in there and try and mush it around. It's very challenging. Sometimes I've even taken a pair of pliers and grabbed it and put it through. But over the years, I've learned that leaving just an extra inch of material makes my life so much easier. And let me show you how much easier it is. Let's look at the same bracelet with just an extra inch or so of material left down here. This is worth the extra investment. I know we're going to cut it off, but it makes my life so much better. So I'm going to go ahead and put on my crimp bead. I have so much space here, breathing room, I feel like. I'm going to go ahead and put the AccuFlex through one side of the AccuGuard. So you can see how easily that's gone through the AccuGuard, and I still have plenty of space to pick this up, put it through my crimp bead, and put it through the other beads. I really recommend leaving just that little extra space for finishing your strung jewelry. An easy mistake to make when stringing jewelry is not actually finishing the ends of your stringing material. Let me show you what I mean. So you can see this end, and let me bring this nice and close so you can see. I have this crimped with just the AccuFlex, is what I used for this one, showing here, and you have made a little loop there, and I've crimped it and put my crimp cover on. This will work. You can do this, but over time, this AccuFlex is actually going to wear. As it rubs against whatever you're putting on, whether it's a jump ring or a loop or something like that, Eventually, over time, this is going to wear out. So at the other end, you can see that I finished it with an AccuGuard. AccuGuards are a wonderful way to finish your strung jewelry. They really give you a nice finished look, and they protect the wire from fraying over time, so your jewelry will last much longer. Now, if you don't want to use an AccuGuard, another option is to use French wire. Let me grab a little piece of French wire here. You can see it's a very fine coiled tubing, and I would just cut off a little bit, just like about that much. And this is a tube, so I would string my AccuFlex through the tube and back through my crimp bead, kind of like an AccuGuard. There's another way to finish the ends of your jewelry. One of the most common mistakes in stringing jewelry is actually using the wrong stringing material for your project. So let's look at a few different kinds of material and look at what you do and don't want to use for that item. So I have several different beads here because beads is often what we're stringing, so let's talk about those. First, I have these really great little pearls. These are little Druck pearl beads. They're glass inside, but they're very, very lightweight, being so small. They're just 4 millimeters. And so they require a stringing material that's compatible with them. So what would I use for such a tiny bead? Let's look at some different options. First, let's look at AccuFlex. This is one of the most common things that I use for stringing. And AccuFlex comes in several different sizes. So we've got a 0.24, which is the largest, and it's a pretty heavy material. Look at that. You can really see. It's like a very thick thread, kind of. And then there is a 0.19, which is a mid-grade, a mid-size. I use this for a lot. And then there is a 0.14. See that? This one is actually a colored AccuFlex. I thought this would be fun to show you. And it shows up really well here. Look how thin that is. It's really like thin thread. So if I were going to choose one of these to string a little 4 millimeter bead like my Druck pearls, I would probably choose the 0.14. It's going to fit through the hole really well. It's going to have a really nice drape because it is so thin, and it's going to make the bracelet a little more slinky and kind of user-friendly. So let's look at Fireline for my 4 millimeter pearls here. I've got a couple different types of Fireline. This is another great stringing material that a lot of people love. It comes in different weights. So here, for example, I have a 6-pound and a 10-pound. So let me show you the 6-pound is really nice and thin. Again, this is like a thin thread. It's very, very durable. Fireline in all of its weights, but see how thin that is. This is great for something like seed beading. You can also use it for a small pearl, like the 4 millimeter pearls. And here is a 10-pound Fireline. You can see that it is very, very thick. It's much thicker than that 6-pound. And it's also a little bit stiffer. It tends to kind of want to bounce back to its original shape. So it's not going to drape as well with a very thin pearl like our 4 millimeter pearl. Moving on, let's look at another bead. So we've got these 8 millimeter glass beads. This is really kind of a mid-sized bead. This one has more possibility with it because it is a mid-sized bead. You can go different ways. If I were using AccuFlex with these, so we have our 0.14, our 0.19, or our 0.24. If I want say it's a bracelet again, if I want it to be very drapey and flowy, I'm probably going to choose the 0.19 AccuFlex for that. It's a really nice weight. It's going to make it drapey and flowy. if that's what I want. Now, if I want it to be more, have more body and be more kind of bangly for a strung piece, I don't know if that's a word, I made that word up, I might use the 0.24 AccuFlex for that. I could use either. It just depends on the result that I want from the piece. Now with the Fireline, for a mid-sized bead like this, I would probably use the 10-pound because this has a little more body to kind of keep up with the weight of that bead. The 6-pound is super thin and really isn't appropriate for a larger, heavier bead. Now let's look at these great fish beads. Aren't these wonderful? These are glass beads and they have a lot of body, quite a bit of weight to them. So if I were to string these, I would probably want something heavier. I would probably choose my 0.24 AccuFlex, a heavier Fireline, or maybe I want a stretchy bracelet. I could go with power cord. The power cord, I would probably choose like a 0.8 or a 1 millimeter. 0.8 is my favorite because it makes the easiest knots. Now, if you wanted to do a stretchy bracelet with these little itty bitty beads, you could go with a 0.5 millimeter power cord. And just to kind of wrap this up, because we're talking about appropriate stringing materials, I wanted to bring in some wire. So we have real thin wire like this, and a lot of times people call this beading wire. This is a very thin gauge. I think this is a 28 gauge. It sure is. We pull a little more of that out so you can see. It's very thin, and a lot of people think because it's called beading wire that it's appropriate to string your necklaces and bracelets and things like that on. And actually, you don't want to string a necklace or a bracelet on wire like this, even though it does say beading wire. This kind of beading wire is for embellishing, like wiring beads onto a component or something like that. If you were to string onto this very thin wire, even though it is very flexible and malleable, it's going to kink in funny places and it's not going to drape the way you want a necklace or bracelet to drape. Now we've covered the 5 biggest mistakes in stringing jewelry. Now you've learned how to crimp correctly. You've learned how much stringing material to leave at the end of your piece. You have learned how not to crimp too tightly to leave that slack and to leave space for your crimp cover when you crimp a bead on. You've learned how to properly finish the ends of your piece, and you've learned how to choose the correct stringing material for your project. If you would like more instructional videos, make sure and check out our website. We have so many available for you. I really hope this has helped you. Please make sure and give a little like to the video that spreads it around so more people will see it, and become part of our family both on Facebook and on YouTube. Like what you see so far? Click on the link in the description below to sign up for our email list and learn more about jewelry making techniques and supplies.
Number 2. Make your own Apple Watch band for a fraction of the price.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Fire Mountain Gems and Beads Jewelry Making Studio. Today we're going to talk about the Apple Smart Watch. Aren't they cool? They're so fun and they're so Dick Tracy. But let me ask you, does yours look like this? Just like everybody else's? Time to personalize that puppy.
Sign up for our email newsletter. Links for that as well as all the materials used in this video can be found in the description box below.
So, we have at Fire Mountain Gems a brand new selection of these Apple Watch findings. So these are the watch band ends that you can personalize any way you like. We have the silver and the copper. You could pretend that was rose gold, and also black in 2 different sizes. They're very similar, but they're a slightly different size. And they all fit the Apple Smartwatch Series 4 through 8. So feel confident that you can get these and personalize. There's so many things you can do. You could use an Apple Watch with a survival band on it. You could do a bohemian style wrap bracelet with your Apple Watch, and Ooh, yeah, anything you want. You could do a fancy seed beaded watch band. What an idea, huh? I want to show you what I think is the easiest way, which is this, which is just done with stretchy cord, 4 strands of beads on stretch cord. So you don't even have to bother with a clasp. So let me show you how this is done. Take one of the Apple Watch findings. They look like this. And we're going to tie on a piece of 0.8 millimeter power cord. Power cord is probably my favorite for stretchy bands. They're very strong. I'm using black. In reality, I would have used clear, but I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. So I just put that onto the band and tie a knot. I will use a surgeon's knot, which is really easy. It just gives it a little more friction so that it stays tied better. This is your basic granny knot, I guess you'd call it. For a surgeon's knot, you'll just wrap that tail around one more time, and that extra friction makes it a little bit harder to come untied. So that's what a surgeon's knot looks like. Pull that nice and tight. And don't worry about pulling tight on this power cord. It's tough stuff. So I pull that really tight, and then I add another knot on top of that, just an ordinary granny knot. And I pull that tight, not wrapping around my band. There we go. And you can see how tight I'm pulling it. You can see it like cutting into my fingers because I'm pulling it that hard. This is some really good stretchy cord. I have occasionally broken it, but very rarely. So I make sure that baby is tight. And then I like to add just a dot of glue. I like to use the E6000 Fraylock. It's a nice flexible glue, just for that extra little bit of security. Make sure that thing doesn't come untied. Just a little tiny bit of glue. Not so much that we can't hide it, just a little bit. Now, I would normally let that dry and then trim this cord, but you don't want to watch glue dry. I'm going to trim that cord right now. That extra little tail. Now, I don't particularly like the look of that knot, so I will take a crimp cover. This is always quite an effort for me. There we go. So I've got that knot inside of the crimp bead so that I can hide it. Come on. And I'm going to use my chain nose pliers to sort of gently crush that crimp bead gently, sort of thinking like a snowball, that little tiny piece of cord sticking out, so that I sort of squish it a little bit that way and I squish it a little bit that way and try and get it so that the seam barely shows. Squish it back and forth. And now I can just go ahead and string this any way I like, which is the beauty of using these smartwatch band findings. You can string it any way you like, any color you like. You can make a smartwatch band finding for every single outfit you own, or also for your friends and family, or maybe for sales at the bazaar. Just string it on any way you like. And this watch band is planned for 4 strands of beads. You don't have to use 4. You can use 3, or you could use more if maybe you're using smaller beads. So individualized. You can do it any way you like. That's what I love about them. It's just personalizing. So once I get this all strung up, I would then put on a stopper on the end so that it doesn't come unstrung while I'm stringing the other 3 strands. And I would wait until I get all 4 strands strung before I put knots on the other end of the finding. And you can see when you get those all strung up and all knotted up, you end up with a band like this. Ta-da! One that's just yours personally. And they're so easy to switch them out. So let's say you made a bunch of different bands. On the back here is a little tiny toggle. And you push that down with your thumbnail and you just slide the band off like that. Push the little button down and slide the band off. And then you can slide on any other watch band you have hanging around. Slide it on. Ta-da! And they're very secure when they're on. And slide it on. And there you have it. Another smartwatch band for your same expensive smartwatch, but with your band that you can make any way you like. Go out and make bunches of them. Have fun. And happy beading, everyone.
And number 1. How to make a turquoise wire-wrapped ring.
Welcome into Fire Mountain Gems and Beads. Today, we are going to be showing you how to make this beautiful turquoise, sterling silver, and crystal fashions wire-wrapped ring. I absolutely love wire wrapping rings, and it's not something we do enough of, so I'm so excited to get to show you how to do this today. It's really not that hard. There's just 3 materials, and you're going to learn the skill set to do it. Make sure and like, share, and subscribe to the video if you love it. The first thing I'm going to do is talk about the materials. We have got some of these great 10 millimeter flat round, kind of puffy turquoise beads, some crystal passions, tiny 3 millimeter bicones that are the perfect accent for the turquoise, and then some 22 gauge half hard sterling silver wire. It's a round wire. All right. So the first thing we'll do is just cut our wire. I'm going to cut about 22 inches, maybe just an inch or 2 extra. So I'm just going to pull that off the roll. Let's see here. I'm pretty good at eyeballing it. You can actually get out a tape measure if you need it. A little kinked up on the roll. 1 second. Okay, I'm feeling good about that. All right, and then the wire isn't perfectly straight, and I want it to be, I want to get all the kinks out. So I'm going to take my wire straightener, and at the end of the wire, I am going to wrap that around the wire. There's 3 little sections, and I'm pulling the wire through. And that feels pretty good. Now we're ready to wrap our ring. And what we're going to wrap around is called a ring mandrel. This is a stainless steel mandrel. And as you can see, there are numbers up the side of the mandrel, and that tells you what size of ring you're making. Now, when you're wrapping around the mandrel with half hard wire is a little springy. So I'm actually going to wrap about a size and a half smaller than the ring that I want to create. So I think I want to create a size 8 ring that will fit my ring finger. And so I'm going to wrap right at the 6.5 mark. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and thread the turquoise bead onto my wire, and I'm going to center that. So we'll grab the end of the wire. Pick a really pretty turquoise bead. I like this kind of deep one. And we'll just thread that on there. Okay, and then you just kind of want to get it toward the center of the wire. So to do that, I usually grab both ends at about the same place and just find the center. That feels really good right there. Then I'm going to take my wire and I'm going to push it downward on either side, straight down from the bead. So we have the nice flat bead here at the top. That's going to be the top of the ring. And then we have the wire coming down. Then I'm going to take my chain nose plier, just like that. And I'm going to find the bottom of the bead, and I'm going to make a bend upward from the bottom area of the bead. So it'll be a millimeter or 2 down from the side that I just bent down. And that's going to be pretty important so that the bead sits flat on the ring mandrel. I'm going to do that on both sides. Okay. I'm going to take a look at it and make sure my bends look pretty good, about the same. One is a little longer than the other. So I'm going to straighten that back out and make it just slightly longer because I do want them to be uniform for the ring to look really good. That looks about right. Okay. Now I'm going to set that bead right at the 6.5 mark because I want a size 8. So it's 1.5 sizes up. Different people do this differently. This is just my method because the wire is going to spring out a little bit. And then I'm going to kind of clamp it at the 6.5 mark. And I'm going to wrap one side around and the other side around the opposite direction. And it'll kind of move around on you, so you just have to do some adjusting. That's about right there. So we have our first wrap, and that is the beginning of our ring. Then I'm going to try and keep this kind of tension on both sides of the wire, and I'm going to wrap 2 wraps above and all the way around and keeping that tension, and 2 wraps below. And it's already moving down to the 7, so I'm going to move that back up a little bit. There was 1 wrap and then 2 wraps. Once you get it wrapped again, you can move it around. But we want to end up with 2 wraps on either side of those original wraps. Okay. And I'm kind of moving that guy back up to the 6.5 mark and squeezing all my wraps together. You can use your fingernails, or you can clamp the bottom with your finger and grab a chain nose plier if you don't have fingernails. Either way. All right. Now, here's the trick. You want to keep as much of the tension as you can, and we're going to slide this off the ring mandrel and set the ring mandrel aside. So I want to really kind of try and keep those wraps together. And all right. And then I'm just kind of clamp it between my thumb and forefinger right here at the bottom where these wires, the tails are coming out, just like that. And at this point, it will have grown a little bit. So the next thing we're going to do is use one of the tail wires to wrap right around near the bead to secure it, and then we'll do the other side. But before we do that, I want to see how much this has grown because I really do want to end up with an 8. So we might need to do some adjusting. So 7.5, it's right at 8, just like I had planned. Isn't that crazy how quickly it expands like that? So I am going to keep this clamped between my thumb and my forefinger, really making sure that that doesn't expand too much. And I want all the wires to kind of be around the same plane. And then I'm going to bring one of the tails up right, and I'm going to curve it around so it kind of naturally lays right where the bead is resting, making sure I don't lose any of that tension. And I will clamp that with my chain nose pliers right near that bend. And I'm keeping lots of pressure on. And I'm going to wrap around once and then around a second time to secure that. And you can see they're kind of coming out. That's okay. We're going to put them back together here. Now, before I do the second wrap, I am going to put it back on my ring mandrel and just check the size. We are still at an 8. That's perfect. Okay, so I'm going to bring the other tail up, curve it around so it kind of rests right near that bead. Take my chain nose pliers and clamp those wires. Oh, that sprung out a little bit. I got to fix it. And if it springs out, check the size again before you wrap. You might want to make some adjustments. I think we've gone out a little bit further now. It's at a 9. So, and the reason being is that my first wrap has fallen down. So I'm going to pull that first wrap up right against the bead. And I'm going to use the loose tail and pull that in a little bit, making adjustments until I get back to the size that I want. This is a really normal part of a wire wrapping process for a wire ring. Okay. I'm feeling like that is back to where I want it. And before I wrap it, I'm just going to check it real quick. It's back at an 8. That's good. Okay. I'm going to make sure the first wrap is where it belongs. I'm going to push that up with my fingernail. And then I think I'm just going to clamp it with my fingers real close. And I'm going to wrap a couple of times to secure this side. And it's a bit of a messy wrap ring. It's something that's actually pretty popular. And it's okay that it's not perfect for this kind of a ring. Okay, I'm bringing both of my wraps up and feeling really good about that. I'm going to clamp the bottom here. And the wraps will still move at this point. That's okay. We're going to fix that in just a second when we do the decorative wraps around the stone. Okay, so I'm going to start with that first wrap that I made because that's the one that's wanting to move the most. And I'm going to bring the wrap around so it's coming over the ring. And I'm going to make sure that it's nice and straight at this point. So I might take my nylon jaw pliers and straighten that out a little bit. I don't want any kinks in it or bends. I want it to be really clean because we're going to use the natural curve of the wire and go around that turquoise bead. And we want this to be up really close to that bend. And you only want a really like a millimeter or so of space between the wire and the ring. So it takes a little adjusting. Once you get it where you want it, I can bring this tail out of the way. Once you get it where you want it, just wrap it once around the ring. And I do that kind of ahead of that other wrap that's already there. So closer to the bead than that wrap. And just once around like that. And so we have our first wire coming around. That's our first decorative wrap. And then I'm going to leave that tail out of the way. And then I'm going to bring the other tail on the other side of the bead. And also make sure that there's no kinks on that side. So let's straighten that out a little bit. And wrap that around your bead. Okay. And then you're going to make one wrap just like you did before. This will go over the other wraps on the other side, but that is just fine. Just bring it as close to the bead as you can. All right. So we have our first 2 decorative wraps, and it's okay at this point to make some little adjustments on those. Make sure it looks like you want it to look. I'm pretty happy with that. I might squeeze my original wraps together a little bit and round it out. Okay, now we're going to make the decorative wrap that goes on the outside that has the little crystal passions. Crystals, these are blue zircon. So we're going to thread on 3 blue zircon crystals. Then we're going to make a little loop in the wire to keep the crystals where we want them. Bring it around and finish that side. So let's grab our crystals and thread those on. There's 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so we're going to let those fall all the way down. And we're going to take our round nose pliers, the very, very tip of them. We're going to clamp right against the beads. And I'm going to pull that wire around the tip to make a little loop that faces the bead, toward the bead. And I'm going to let the wire come back and just let the tail fall naturally where in the line with the beads. And then we're going to bring that around and let it kind of curve. And we want it just a bit bigger than the original wrap. that's going here. Just very slightly. And then I'm going to wrap that tail around the ring several times to completely secure this side. All right, there's one. I'm going to do at least 2 more. I could do 3 more. Let's see how it looks. I just want them to look like they're uniform. There's 2 wraps. There's 3 wraps. See how I feel about that. I think I'm going to go 1 more. We'll go for 4. And I'm going to bring that tail all the way under to the opposite side. And I'm going to cut it off, not underneath. You know, most of the time when you're doing a wrapped piece, you cut off your tail on the very inside of the project. But the inside of the project here is where your finger is, and you don't want the edge right at your finger. So I'm going to kind of cut it off halfway up the side here. Just there, real close. And then as always, whenever you cut off a tail of wire, I'm going to take my chain nose pliers or a flat nose plier, and I'm going to go around in a little circle and just squeezing in to make sure the tail is nice and tucked in and it won't catch anything, especially your skin. Okay, so I'll go ahead and put 3 of the blue zircon crystals on the opposite side to balance that out. There's 1, 2, and 3. Let those fall down all the way to the bottom there again. And then we're going to take the very tip of the round nose pliers right against those crystals when they're all the way toward the base. And we'll go ahead and make a little loop, and that locks those crystals in place there. Just like that. And then we're going to bring the wire around this side, fairly close to that first wrap. Want just a little bit of space between the 2. And then I'm going to finish off the other side. And once you get ready to wrap, just check the position of that wire again. And then I'm going to wrap 4 times just like I did on the other side, so I have a balanced look. So there's 1. Let's get a second one here. And I can mangle the end of this. It's fine. We're going to cut that off. That's what happens when you wrap. 2. 3. At this point, I'm going to take my chain nose pliers and just snug my wraps together because they're a little far apart. I like them to be nice and close up together. I probably will even take it and just kind of put a little pressure on that last wrap. There we go. And bring the last one through. And remember, you're coming up the side, not on the bottom, when you cut off that tail. So we'll snip off that tail nice and close. And then I'll take my chain nose pliers and I'll just squeeze gently, go around a little circle and make sure my tail is nice and snug. And I'll even snug up my wraps again. I might even flip it around to the other side and make sure the other side are nice and snug as well. Good, I like that. Okay, now it's time to look at the top here. Look at the design and see if you want to make any adjustments. So you can take your round nose pliers or your chain nose pliers, even just your fingernails if you have that, and just kind of manipulate the wire a little bit if you feel like it needs it. I feel pretty good about this. I like the way that that looks. Now, what I'm going to do to finish off the ring really and make sure that I'm at the correct size, I'm going to put it back on the ring mandrel, and I'm really going to push down, and I'm going to twist, And that gets the wires that are on the bottom here all to be flush together, stretched properly. Nothing's kind of out of place. And I'm going to twist it, and it's right on the 8, right where I wanted it, which is great. All right, so we have our beautiful size 8 ring. Now, you'll notice on the original ring here, we've got this pretty antique look to it. And so I'm going to show you now how to make the antique look for your ring. So let's set that aside. And in order to get this beautiful shiny silver to have this really pretty antique look, we're going to use some patina gel, which is really just stabilized liver of sulfur. Doesn't smell great, but it does really good things. So use it in a ventilated area like my big open studio here. Okay, so I'm going to paint the patina gel on with a paintbrush. But before I do that, I'm going to dilute it because you can see here that even though we have an antique look, it's a pretty light antique. It's not heavy antique. It's still very silver. We didn't get it real black. We've got some real nice definition here in some of the little valleys between the wire. And that's great, but most of it is pretty silver. And when you're antiquing with patina gel, you can go anywhere from black to a very, very light grayish. So in order to dilute that, I'm going to take a little dish of water here and one of my triangle trays. This is a really easy way to do it. And just scoop up a few drops of water in your triangle tray. Doesn't need to be very much, just a little corner of it there. And then I'm going to take just a drop of the patina gel. It doesn't really take very much. So just a little drop of patina gel in that, maybe 2. And that's all we're going to need. So I'm going to take my paintbrush and just mix that up. And so it's kind of uniform consistency there. So it's all mixed in. So now we have a dilute liver of sulfur here, stabilized liver of sulfur with the patina gel. And what I'm going to do next, you can use a glove, or sometimes I'll just grab a paper towel and I'll hold the piece so I don't get the liver of sulfur on my fingers. And I'm going to start painting the wire, and I'm going to do it very quickly. It's okay if you get a little bit on the stones or the crystals, it won't hurt it. So I'm just going to make sure that the whole thing gets covered fairly quickly. The reason that I'm doing it quickly is that it will pretty quickly turn black, and I only really want it to go to a gray state. I don't want it to get super black. Let's put one of those down there and I'll paint on that. Okay, so once I've got it all painted, make sure you get the underside too. I'm going to let it sit for a minute, and you can see it's already really changing color. You can see that going to like a bronzish color, and the longer it sits, the darker it gets. So I'm going to let it sit for another maybe 30 seconds here and let it get a little bit darker. And see how that's going. If you missed any spots, you can go back. Like I feel like I missed a little spot there, little spot there. Just let it keep processing. It's doing really well. It's getting much darker. And that's the beauty of adding a little bit of water to the liver of sulfur before you start. Because it makes the processing speed on darkening much slower, so you have more working time with it. If you had painted it on just out of the bottle, it would go immediately black. And liver of sulfur doesn't work on everything. It's great for sterling silver, silver filled too. Now to stop this process, all I'm going to do is take my little dish of water, and I'm just going to drop it in the dish of water. That immediately stops it from darkening anymore, because basically we're diluting it much further. And I'm just going to, it's not going to hurt your fingers or anything. Swish it around there so it gets in all the crevices, and then take it back out. And now it's stable. It's where it's going to be. It won't process anymore. So we got kind of a medium tone on the whole thing. It didn't go completely black. It's definitely not silver. It's almost a brownish color. Now, in order to get it to this really pretty silvered look, I'm going to take some steel wool, some sanding pads, and sanding stick, and I'm going to buff off a lot of that product. But first, I'm going to protect this area. All right, so let's go ahead and start buffing that out. So I'm going to start with some steel wool. Just a little piece is all you need. You can get that at your local hardware store or big box store. I've got a little tail here sticking out. I'm going to fix that. There we go. And all you're going to do is protect your stone. You know, I like to put my finger over the stone, maybe over the crystals a little bit. And I'm just going to start working it with the steel wool. You'll see lots of it comes off. And see how it's already taking that bronze off, but it's leaving a really pretty antique silver finish. The nice thing about the steel wool is it really gets in the kind of crevices. It's not really going to hurt your stone. I just try not to scrub over the stone. And just flip it around and just get it everywhere. You can see that bronze color, and you want to bring it back to that pretty antique silver color. So you want to just make sure and get all the little areas that have that bronze color. You can flip this stone sideways if you need to a little bit. Get it all that wire. Flip it around to the inside. Make sure you're getting the inside really well. Just work it. Take your time. All right, next I'm going to take a sanding pad, just kind of a medium to light grit, like this brown one here in the set. These sets of sanding pads are one of my favorite tools, and I'm just going to go over it a little bit more. It's a little heavier than the steel wool, and it's going to bring up a little more of the silver. And so there's some little places in here that I'm having a hard time getting to. I'll kind of move my wire around a little bit. Move my stone. And then we have these great sanding sticks that are fantastic. And they have this little bitty edge, like a corner on there. And I use that corner to get into really tight spots. And that'll get the kind of bronze color from the patina gel off those tighter areas too. That feels really good. Last minute adjustments. You can move your wire around at this point, round it out a little bit if you need to, change the shape if you want a different shape. I'm actually really liking how this one came out. It's not as rounded as the original. It's got more of an elongated look, but I just think it's so pretty. I love it. And there you have your beautiful antique silver finished ring. Wire wrapped with turquoise and Crystal Passions crystals. Just so beautiful. Thank you so much for being with us here today. If you'd like more start to finish projects, make sure and check out our website. We have so many for you. Make sure and like, share, and subscribe the video if you loved it. And sign up for our email newsletter. The details for that are in the description box below.